The legislation provides for strong and sustained oversight through an accountability board, transparency requirements, and funding of GAO and Inspector General. However, the committee will be on the front lines in supervising the billions of dollars in spending planned to restart our economy. In addition to economic oversight, the plan describes dozens of other topics for oversight, from health care and consumer protection to contracting and cybersecurity. It is an ambitious agenda, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think in this area of the oversight plan, we have been able to work. It's a better tribute to bipartisan work than I could have imagined. The initial plan that we looked at, although ambitious, lacked a couple of important areas, some of which in the previous Congress we believe were opened but not completed. Certainly, the Chairman will remember that when looking at the Bush administration, we discovered that they had done an insufficient job of maintaining their emails for the archivist. Even as the tens of millions of dollars were spent to try to retrieve them, we continued to hold hearings in which we discovered that there had not been a proper plan, that on a daily basis that it did not think in terms of their requirement to maintain those records for the archivist in perpetuity. Although I'm quite sure that a president who carries his own BlackBerry, both classified and unclassified, will be far ahead of President Bush's administration some 8 years ago, I appreciate the fact that that and many other areas of primary interest of this committee were added back in, and particularly those in which, although there is legislative jurisdiction in other committees, including the Energy and Commerce and Financial Services Committee, from an oversight standpoint, I believe that the Chairman was quite right in adding it back in for that purpose. And so I'm looking forward to this passing unanimously. I believe that the Republican members are fully in support of it. And I might take this moment to just add one thing, which is that although the entire staff of the minority is out here today, with this ambitious staff, and particularly the impending trillions of dollars between the TARP, the stimulus, the likely TARP 2, and the likely next stimulus, we are going to need more people. The staff that is here today represents the historic staff that has done for the previous 8 years the oversight of business as usual. So later, you and I will go before the House administration to talk in terms of authorized slots. And I believe that this will be an opportunity for us to explain to House administration that we can live within our financial means, but we are going to need more talented young people to help with the research and the oversight of those new expenditures. And I know that we will work in an equally bipartisan fashion on that. And again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for starting this off in a truly bipartisan fashion. Yield back.
Thank you very much. And are there any amendments to the oversight report? If there are no amendments to the oversight report, the question now comes on approving the committee's oversight report for the 111th Congress. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
And opposes? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the report is approved. Now we'd like to turn to the legislative business of the day. We have one bill to consider on classification policy and several postal namings and resolutions. H.R. 854, I now call up H.R. 854, the Overclassification Reduction Act, which was introduced by Representative William Lacey Clay, Chair of the Information and Policy Committee. I ask unanimous consent that H.R. 854 be considered as read and open for amendments at any point without objection.
Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois. I'm from Missouri.
Missouri. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your new leadership position as chair of the committee. H.R. 854, the Overclassification Reduction Act, seeks to eliminate the widespread practice of overclassifying important documents across the federal government. This bill is identical to H.R. 6575, which passed in the House on September the 9th, 2008. While some information must be protected to avoid threatening our national security, it is damaging for the federal government to hinder information sharing between state and local law enforcement and even other federal agencies. H.R. 854 calls on the archivists of the U.S. to identify specific standards and requirements to prevent overclassification. The archivists would also consider what classified information should be prepared in an unclassified format. This legislation creates a partnership between the agencies and their employees to reduce overclassification information. Employees will receive training and be rewarded for successfully challenging improperly classified information. The bill also establishes a random audit of classified information by agency inspector generals. H.R. 854 takes a government-wide approach to improving information sharing. By doing so, it will help strengthen our national security and make our government more transparent. And, Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support the measure. I yield back.
I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To date, classification practices have been arbitrary and inconsistent. In the previous Congress, we supported this bill and will continue to do so. It's clear that left to their own devices, agencies will simply overclassify virtually everything, often using classifications for unclassified information, such as for official use only, confidential, and so on, and then raising to secret or top secret documents that, in fact, are widely available and reach no classified solution. In order to make these documents available in a timely fashion, the archivist needs to have the tools in order to reach a reasonable classification, or these documents needlessly would never be available. Although this is agency specific, and I will be offering an amendment that will help make sure that there is a balancing act, that each agency has input with the archivist, I thoroughly support the gentleman's bill in that we have to begin attacking this at least as to historic information, and would hope that this committee would also look at this in real time and participate in trying to get the overclassification policy during non-archive periods to be clarified. But that's a bigger project and not one for today. And if it's appropriate now, I have an amendment at the desk.
Ranking member makes an, I understand that you would recommend, I understand. 3 minutes to Representative Conley from the great state of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's great to be with you. I just wanted to thank and congratulate our colleague, Mr. Clay, for this piece of legislation. I think it is long overdue. Government tends to often overclassify and, frankly, come down on the side of secrecy rather than transparency and sunshine. And some kind of balancing by the Congress to ensure we protect certainly that which needs to be protected, but to make sure that the public has access and a right to know the works of its government is preserved. So I just think this is a corrective measure I'm happy to support, and I want to thank Mr. Clay for his leadership in the issue.
Thank you. The clerk will designate the amendment. Mr. Issa has amendment at the desk.
Amendment to H.R. 854 offered by Mr. Issa of California. In Section 3A, strike paragraph 1.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent it be considered as read.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, first...
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in explanation of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this amendment does, Mr. Chairman, first it ensures that before any regulations are issued, there are full consultations between the archivists and all federal agencies with classification authority. I believe this will ensure that every federal entity with their individual expertise can make it known to the archivist, and obviously it could lead to a standardization of classification, because the archivist, when seeing differences between agencies, would be able to potentially resolve those at the time of rulemaking. Second, although we are encouraging challenges to classification decisions, we need to ensure that those making the challenge actually have a security clearance and that the person they are challenging has classification authority. Although narrow, we believe this is essential to maintain the proper classification or the current classification until such time as a determination is made, but not, which Mr. Clay would appreciate, not allowing for someone simply to stonewall. Finally, we need to ensure that the training provided for in the bill is not overly burdensome on those serving in remote locations or posted overseas. This provision provides an outline for remote training programs, something that I'm sure would have occurred, but we wanted to make sure it was in the body of the bill. That does it, and I would urge passage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman Issa. I believe we are in agreement on the policy issues, and our staff have worked together on the language. I am prepared to accept this amendment with the understanding that we will continue to work together to refine the language as we move to the floor. Does any other members wish to speak on the Issa amendment?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, I think the gentleman has a common sense, straightforward amendment, and I have no objection to it. I just want to be able to recognize my bill when this process is over. I yield.
Gentleman's point is well taken. The question is now on the amendment by Mr. Issa of California. All those in favor say aye. All opposers no, say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments? I now move that the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform report H.R. 854, the Overclassification Reduction Act, to the House with the recommendation that the bill do pass. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 854 to the House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, all opposers, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. And H.R. 854 is ordered reported. The next order of business is 8 postal naming bills and resolutions. I ask unanimous consent that these resolutions be considered in block and read and open to amendment at any point. The resolutions include H-Res 18, introduced by Representative Steve Cohen. This measure recognizes the life, achievement, and contributions of Paul Newman. H-Res 83, introduced by Representative Al Green. This measure recognizes the significance of Black History Month, which is commemorated annually during the month of February. H.R. Res 47, introduced by Representative Ted Poe. This measure expressed support for the goal and ideals of Peace Officers Memorial Day, which is commemorated annually on May the 15th. H.Res 110, introduced by Representative Mike Doyle. This measure congratulates the National Football League champion Pittsburgh Steelers for winning Super Bowl 43 and becoming the most successful franchise in National Football League history with their record of 6 Super Bowl titles. H-Res 112, introduced by Representative Christopher Lee. This measure expresses support for the goal and ideals of American Heart Month and National Wear Red Day. And H-Res 139, which was introduced by Representative Phil Hare, commemorates the life and legacy of President Abraham Lincoln on the bicentennial of his birth. H.R. 516, introduced by Representative Phil Hare. This bill designates the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 2105 East Cook Street in Springfield, Illinois, as the Colonel John H. Wilson, Jr. Post Office Building. H.R. 663, introduced by Representative John Barrow. This bill designates the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 12877 Broad Street in Sparta, Georgia, as the Yvonne Ingram Ephraim Post Office Building. These are all worthy measures, and I urge their adoption. Does the ranking member have any comments on these issues?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minority has reviewed these postal namings and resolutions, and we find they meet the requirements of the committee and would urge their adoption. Yield back. Thank you.
Any other comments from any of the members on the committee on either side? I ask unanimous consent that the 8 resolutions previously described be reported favorably by the committee without objection, so ordered. I now call up H.R. 131, which was introduced by Representative Elton Gallagher, and establishes a federal commission to honor and celebrate the 100th anniversary of the birth of Ronald Reagan. I have a manager's amendment at the desk for this bill. The amendment conforms the text of the bill to the language that passed the House in the last Congress, and I ask unanimous consent that the amendment be adopted without objection. So ordered. Do any members wish to be heard on the bill?
I move,
Yield
Chairman.
to the ranking member.
Yes, I move to strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, the Ronald Reagan Centennial Commission Act is appropriate and well thought out. With the help of the majority, this has been carefully crafted to make sure that it reflects the same bill that was reported unanimously from this committee in the previous Congress. And I appreciate the willingness of the majority to work on this bill in a very timely fashion. And I know Mr. Gallagher personally made calls and was quite pleased to find that, that we were able to do this so quickly. Ronald Reagan, whether it was his time as a Democrat or his time as a Republican, will clearly go down in history as the great communicator and one of America's finest generation-shifting presidents. At a time when we have a new president who we all hope will be equally generation-shifting, it is important that we recognize the legacy of presidents such as Kennedy, Lincoln, and Reagan for what they did during their tenure to move America in a positive direction. I appreciate the majority's hard work in a very timely fashion on the 2 amendments that were in the manager's amendment and urge support of the legislation. Yield back.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that H.R. 131 be favorably reported by the committee. Without objections, so ordered. This concludes our business for today. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make technical and conforming changes to all matters ordered reported. Without objection, so ordered. The committee now stands adjourned.